So welcome to the Node.js Node API team meeting for September 17th, 2021. We'll follow our standard practice of looking at the things we've tagged for milestone 11. Before we do that, does anybody have any announcements that they'd like to share? If not, we'll start by looking what was tagged for milestone 11. So the first one is looking at the Node 0 port and the review that was requested there. A number of Nick and Kevin who had started to review aren't here, so I think we'll just assume there's no update on that this week. So let's move on to the stale issues, which are in Node add-on API. So actually, I forgot to start screen sharing, so let me do that. Okay, and let me just promote Gabriel. Okay, so hopefully that works better. So the first one is this number 912. Let's take a quick look there. Right, so I think this one, yes, we can. You're much better.
Awesome.
Excellent. So this one, I think we talked about last time. Jack had landed the issue which went into Node Core, and we talked a little bit about what to do in Node add-on API itself. I'm just wondering, did we capture that in some other issue? But I guess I don't know, Jack, if there's any update on this in terms of work on the Node API side, or it's just we should leave it as is until we make some progress.
I haven't really gotten able to get a look at it, but wait, so what do we have to do? What else do we have to do for this part in terms of like next steps?
I think in core it's now done.
Yeah.
But now that we have that ability to basically support it in since it's in core now in the code within the Node add-on API, we want to change the code that handles throwing errors.
Oh, okay.
So that, like, I think I'm not sure if we need to change anything in symbols, or they'll currently just work, but we probably want to test that. But the other thing we'd need to do is that if something is thrown that is like a primitive,
right,
we would want to convert that primitive into something, into like an object that can be handled properly.
Okay, and we want to do that from Node add-on API.
Yeah, exactly. In the Node, it's sort of in this code, which is where we end up with this fatal error.
Yeah.
Instead of that happening, like, so we should now actually, this should just work, I think, for a symbol, because now create reference should work on a symbol, but for native types, we want to wrap them in something instead of throwing an error.
Okay.
How did we decide to handle the discrepancies between Node.js versions? So like some of them might not support storing a symbol because it hasn't permeated all released versions yet.
Do we have an issue? I think we have an issue in, I thought we'd written that down because we did talk about that. Did we? No, do we have an issue in? Wait a sec, this came from stale? No, so where? Because I thought we definitely talked about it last week. I'm not sure, maybe we failed to write it down, but the idea was we were going to do a check of the version. And basically, I think, and we were going to have like an opt-in. We're going to make it opt-in to get the improved behavior. So if you opted in, but I can't remember where we wrote that down, if we did.
Yeah, I remember talking about it, but I also don't remember where we wrote it. Well, if we didn't, then this is as good place as any, right?
Yeah, like basically we could go back and watch the video and figure it out exactly, but it was like, I think it was like opt-in, right? Okay, change API, opt-in through define, right? to if opt in, then basically improve behavior so that little or like what is it? The primitives are wrapped, right? Symbols are handled. Okay. 3. In doc.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
symbols are handled. Symbols are handled okay if core supports the behavior.
Right.
So
If core supports behavior.
yeah. Otherwise, expect failure.
Right.
So basically, the user is opting
Right.
into attempting to use symbols.
Right.
The interesting thing is we don't even need a version check, because the failure of creating a reference from a symbol is tantamount to a version check.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Maybe I think that's what we were like, can check if exists for symbols by catching error it occurs, right?
Yeah.
Actually, but otherwise, like I think if you otherwise wrap symbol
Yeah.
somehow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but in the doc, make clear that new behavior will become default sometime in the future. So code should, so if opting in, handle
Wait a second. We might be able to handle this gracefully. I'm just thinking, like, if we so the problem with this whole thing is that we want this persistent reference because an exception tears through the stack, including the scope in which the value was created, right? That's the fundamental reason why we're doing any of this reference stuff, right? So we could do a node, well, either a Node.js version check, because we have like an API get node version, or we can do that if creating the symbol fails, or creating the reference for the symbol fails, we can create an object, store the symbol on the object as a property, or an array, whatever, it doesn't matter, and then get a persistent reference to the object, and have a flag inside the NAPI, like the NAPI : error object that says this is a symbol that is wrapped as an object.
Right. That's sort of what you
And
just described, I think, is like the wrap symbol somehow, right?
yeah. Okay, but we do it, not the user.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Okay, I see. Yeah, and so this is the behavior people are opting into.
Right.
Is this so it will always succeed. We do not propagate the error coming from core if it fails to
Right.
create the reference for the symbol. It's
Yep.
just that people need to understand that we're doing this wrapping and unwrapping behind their backs.
Right. So if you opt in, and in the doc that talks about the opting in, it'll say in the future this will actually work properly as a symbol. You will get the original
Yep.
symbol. So write your code so that you can handle both cases. It either being the actual symbol or it being a wrapped object. And then once all LTS versions support it, we'll flip it.
Wait. I think we can. I think we can make it transparent to the user, because in order to get whatever the reference refers to, they have to call like dot value, right? and we can override dot value for errors to unwrap first if it is wrapped.
I think part of it was, though, if you throw something and that's not what you get in the throw.
So ultimately, the error ends up at like if the user doesn't handle the error,
and the error ends up at the code that sends it back to the engine, right? That's our code. So
then in our code we can check that it is a wrapped symbol and unwrap it and then send it to the engine, because at that point nothing is tearing through the stack anymore, right? Because it's going over a C barrier. So you know, you cannot bubble an exception across a C function, right? So we have code that ultimately calls an API throw, right? And that thrown, that which is passed to an API throw, need not be a persistent reference. So,
Okay.
so wrapping exceptions in persistent references is something that we do in Node add-on API.
but not something that is done in Node API.
So you're basically saying by the time we complete the throw, we no longer need a persistent reference.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so basically, so is say, does it? I guess it wouldn't need to be opt-in in that case, right?
I didn't quite understand the question.
It wouldn't need to be opt-in. We could just make this work.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say the new proposal is like, okay, wrap symbols. So wrap primitives in. But can that be throw? I guess it can throw a primitive as well.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
So basically wrap primitives in object, right?
Well, symbols are the only ones that truly need to be wrapped. We can wrap primitives as well, but with primitives you can just copy the value and then just shepherd the value through the stack as the exception tears through it, and then when you convert it to a throw, you can just convert it to a proper an API value. So construct a string, construct a number, construct a whatever, you know, depending on what's in the exception.
Right, like I guess we have, I'd have to look through the stack itself to say like we're creating an error object.
Yeah.
And as part of that, we create a reference.
Yep.
Is it that like for primitives, we don't need a reference?
So if you don't have to create the reference, right? Because the reason we create the reference is because
right.
An API value would go out of scope as it tears through the stack, right?
Yep.
But a primitive that is stored directly in the error object would not go out of scope. It doesn't have the concept of scope, right? It's just stored in memory.
Right.
Right. So
like we need to know whether it's a wrapped or unwrapped version.
Yes. Yes, like, that we need to know, but
okay.
We can handle it.
So we're basically saying on extend and so that it is wrapped or unwrapped, right? For wrapped, use wrapped for primitives or symbols if creating a reference, the symbol fails, right? Primitives, right? 3. So when we get to the nappy throw, and let's just double check here that GitHub. Node API. Is this in, I guess, like it's in some of our wrappers somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just. But we're not throwing an error necessarily in this. We just end up throwing an error because we can't. One fatal error. Okay, let's just. Where are we? Get and clear pending exception. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. Get and clear pending exception, right? So why am I? So our. I'm just looking through this just to make sure. I'm just wondering why we didn't think of this earlier, or if there's some gotcha.
Can you hear
Okay, so
me?
NAPI error extends NAPI object reference.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I think Lucas is trying to join. He
Okay.
could probably shed some light on this.
Yep. Okay.
I'm having some serious audio issues.
Sure. Yeah, let me find the, okay, where are the participants? Oh, there we go. Okay. There, he should be going. Hello, sorry about that. I don't know, Legendikas, if you'd been following the discussion and had something to add.
I'm afraid I'm not catching the discussion.
Okay, we were just talking about this one, the get clear pending exception. And last time we talked about wrapping like the symbol or the primitive in an object. But Gabriel was just suggesting that, instead if we don't necessarily need to create a persistent reference if it's a primitive, and we might be able to solve it that way. And we're just taking a quick look at the code to see, like, is that going to work, or is there some gotcha that that means that that's not going to work? I'm just looking here. So it wasn't there. Right, so I think it's that our new is just creating one. So is it the suggestion that we would, like, this nappy value could be a primitive, but in the construction, we wouldn't create a reference? This right here, we would do a check that says, if it's not an object being passed in, that we would just copy the value in and out.
Yeah, that will be it's very initial thought, I believe.
Sorry, I didn't quite get that. That would be what?
I mean, that was the initial very primitive thought. I didn't test on it. So since since the error class is inheriting the object reference class, so I'm not sure we can, like, say, when the numpy value is a primitive, how do we override this all methods from the object reference? Like, say, the object reference has methods like, say, set a property on the object. As far as I can tell, there is a shorthand method for object reference, So I'm not sure that we can properly handle all these methods on the object reference for primitive values.
We can just error out. Like, is it okay to just error out? I mean, people need to understand that you cannot set the property on an object.
That's one approach. So
the set property can fail, right? So there's
right.
It returns a Boolean whether the set succeeded or not, even by spec. So if people throw an error that is a string and then expect to be able to set a property on that, I mean, it makes sense that it fails. So it's incorrect behavior on the user's part to try to do that, right?
Right. Yes, the major concern I have on this approach is that we have a lot of wrapping in Node add-on API. Yet what we have for Node add-on API now is that it is a very thin wrapping on the native C interface. So if we have this type of wrapping, then there is a lot boilerplate code in Node add-on API, like, say, type checking and many other code pieces that we are going to duplicate in Node add-on API for object for the error class.
That's fair, I think. Yeah, so yeah, you're right. We shouldn't go overboard with the wrapping. So I'm sorry I missed it because of my audio issues. What was the conclusion on just if creating a reference for a symbol fails, then that basically tells us that we are on a version of Node.js where we have not yet implemented where we don't yet have Jack's change available, right? And so how about we limit our wrapping into an object to just when the symbol fails, and then we unwrap again, and then we document that in this case we will wrap. And for primitive values, we just store a copy of the primitive value in the error object, and that's it. What was your opinion on that? I'm sorry I missed that.
Oh,
and I'm sorry.
they-
I'm sorry. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
Sorry. No, that was it. Sorry. Please give me your opinion.
Actually, I don't have very strong opinion on that. Or let's say if we don't test if the symbol is referenceable, then we have to, like say, we have NAPI get another version. So we have to check every compatible version, compatible node version, and how to code
I
it
was just
in the node add-on API.
Michael and I, we were just thinking that, if you try NAPI create reference and you pass in the symbol and it doesn't return NAPI okay, then you know that you're on a Node.js version that doesn't support that yet, right? So you don't have to call NAPI get node version. The failure of creating a reference to a symbol is itself a version check, right? And so you say, okay, an API create reference. If not an API okay, then don't fatal error. Instead, create an object, put the symbol on the object, and then create the reference to the object. And then this code will become dead once Jack's change has reached all node versions.
Yeah. One problem for the object wrapping for symbol is that we have a lot of, like say, disallow JavaScript execution scope in Node core. In that case, we will fail to create the wrapping since the object.set will call into JavaScript eventually. So that would fail anyway.
That's a good point. Well, I mean, we did our best, is all I can say in that case, and we can document this and say that, if you do throw a symbol, then these are the caveats, right? Like, we will do our best to do it, but if JavaScript execution is so excuse me, basically I think the text will be, it will either succeed if it's a new enough version of Node.js, or it will fail if it's an older version of Node.js and JavaScript execution is disabled. Otherwise, it will work. So I think that's pretty good value. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's decent value.
Well, that's kind of why we were saying that, like, we would do it as an opt-in to start. So you opt into this behavior because you might get different behavior on different versions of Node, but we can document that. We can say, if you're opting in, you're going to get better behavior on symbols, but write your code to handle these two cases. Once the all LTS versions support that, then we basically make that the default. And, if you haven't opted in, you just got an error before. So you're only getting something that errored before now working. If you did opt in theory, you read the doc and you did the right thing, so your code continues to work.
Yep.
Oh, you mean the feature will be eventually opt-in? I was thinking that since the reference is only for C++ exceptions enabled, I was thinking that if there is one approach that we can remove the reference wrapping totally for when the C++ exception is disabled. So there is no such wrapping, and people can get very clean, very thin C++ wrapping on the native C interface.
Yeah, that's a good point. For when exceptions are disabled, we don't even need this. Like, ideally, for when exceptions are disabled, we wouldn't even need error to be a subclass of object reference, because we don't need to do any references if exceptions are disabled, right? So I suppose we could store the value in the error when exceptions are disabled.
And there is a point that the error and the exception is two different kinds. Error is supposed to be a subclass of JavaScript error class, and exception can be arbitrary JavaScript values. So eventually I was thinking that the exception, there is a new class for exception that represents the arbitrary JavaScript value, and that will be, like say, should be referenced, and that should be referenced in when C++ is enabled, and the error is just a plain arbitrary JavaScript, the objects, like say.
Yeah, I understand. Yes. Right. So, okay, I think we have a pretty clear picture. So where do we go from here?
Okay, so let me, I'm not sure I could explain that clear picture yet. So let's see if we can write that down. So what's, what would be the first bit we would, what should I write here? Or does somebody want to write something in?
So the first step is that we don't want to introduce breaking change, right?
Yeah.
And about the exception or any other arbitrary things, that will be the next major version steps, I believe.
But even for we don't really have breaking changes for Node on API. So I think we want, it's not like in the next Semver one, we want to break people. We just don't want to break people because that's part of the promise.
But if it's a very, like say, if we consider it as a bug,
it's kind of like, what's the likelihood of somebody having to change their code? If that's really, really, really small, then like in the wrapper, I think we could consider it. But if it's that, most people are going to have to change their code, then I still think we're in the category that we've been trying to avoid.
Mentioning about the error, I want to mention that in recent TypeScript versions, they are marking the caught error as a unknown type, and that would require people to change their code. And before, mostly people are treating the caught exceptions as object mostly. So recent TypeScript version by default marking the exception value as a unknown type. It might not be a object. So people have to change their code eventually, and that's a default behavior. So I'm thinking that if this can be considered a similar way that people have to do the correct way of treating errors and treating exceptions.
I think what would be good is to have the proposal written, like documented, and then we could understand what the impact is going to be to people, and then think about that. I don't have a clear enough understanding of what how we'd plan to change it yet in this current proposal to know.
Yeah, so first step, it will be not breaking change, and we will do our best to handle the approach mentioned by Gabriel, like say, we are breaking out when we cannot referencing symbols and wrapping it in an object, and storing the primitive values in native side and recreating the primitive value when people are accessing the JavaScript values. That will be most feasible way for now.
Okay, so for non-primitives, so for primitives, don't create, like if we look at this code, I wonder, where is it? I think it was here. I guess the challenge is that the reference, so within this error, and I guess it extends let's reference the error. I guess like my first question is like, so if we, in the error, do we actually have to make the reference visible? I mean, it may already be there, but did it need to be visible, or could we just store the value in every case? And the reference is there to keep the value alive if we needed to, but you use the value in the general case, and if it happens to be an object, you create the reference. If not, you don't. Does that make any sense?
While you mentioning the visible thing, I believe there is a method that for object reference that we can fetch the native NaPi value for the object reference. I didn't check that, but I have a. In that case, we cannot mimicking the NaPi value for primitive, right?
Right, I'm trying to find this create reference. Right, so this is the one we're talking about right here, right? Where the problem starts?
I mean, converting a object reference to NaPi underscore ref. I believe there is a method for that.
Right, so, but today you would not be able to create one on a primitive, right? And therefore you would never call that other method and be successful if it was a primitive to start with.
Yeah, right. But when we wrapping it, and then it will be accessible for people.
Right. So I guess what I'm thinking though is that, like in here, say we get in this snappy value, we wrap it in this reference so that the value stays in scope, correct?
Sorry.
Okay. So I was saying we get this value. The main reason we create the reference is so that we make sure that value stays alive.
Yeah.
Right. So what I'm wondering is if we change the code here that basically says store the value, because we always want the value, whether it's a primitive or something else, store the reference to the value, because if it's a primitive, we don't, will the value go away? I guess it does, yes. Right? Okay, yes. So we need to actually, right. So basically it's in here that says get something which either points to an object, which I guess is the reference, or it's a native value. So maybe it's ending up being the same thing as we were already talking about. But like this code basically says, and like if it's a symbol, it could basically try and just, yeah. Okay, maybe it's coming back to the same thing.
For this particular constructor, I think it's basically, we can basically say, you know, an API create reference. If it failed, then don't go fatal right away. Create an object, right, and then store it there, and then create the reference to the object. And if that fails, then yes, then it's fatal. And then right, that would handle symbols, and it would handle primitives, and it would handle everything. And in the case of in the case of symbols, sooner or later it will not fail. So it will only be for primitives sooner or later.
Right.
Yeah.
If primitive.
Well, actually, if an API create reference fails, because that means primitive or symbol.
Sure. Okay.
For now, and sooner or later it will mean if primitive.
Okay. If create reference fails, pull out value store in error, right?
A store in object, or shall we make it an error object? Yeah, that's fine too.
Well, see, it's the error class that's doing this creation, right? In error object.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yes. So like okay, so if we turn the NAPI value back into a primitive, then we're going to have to say like, you know, switch. So first we're going to have to say an API get type, right? And then and then have a switch statement for each one and assign the appropriate field in the error object. So
maybe we want this create wrapper object.
Yeah, I think so. That would be simplest.
Store value on object.
Yeah.
Right. So okay. So that makes sense. Go ahead.
I was wondering if we can use native external and storing.
Oh yeah. Wait, no.
External.
No. An external is exactly like an object, like a JavaScript object, except you cannot set properties on it at all, even if JavaScript execution is enabled. So it has to be an object, like a plain JavaScript object.
Correct.
Right. So basically, I think we're getting back to what we discussed, you know, document that behavior will be different on different versions and that default will change. So basically, okay, right. So basically, if the create a reference fails, and then in code that throws error as JavaScript full value off wrapped off object if we created it, throw that. And even for symbol, isn't that good enough? Because like, if we can do that for primitives, then we've kept the symbol alive by having an object reference it, and we can actually throw the real symbol. So actually, it won't even be that, like the behavior won't actually change.
No, that's right. Yeah. So sooner or later, symbol will fall into the category where you can just simply wrap it and create reference doesn't fail, right?
Right.
And then only the primitives will be left, and that's actually exactly what we want, because primitives will always be different, because we cannot create references to primitives. So, you know, you could argue in retrospect that creating a reference to a symbol was an unnecessary change, but it's not, because you know, for our implementation this happens to work, right? But being able to reference symbols is an important change to make, because it is possible in other engines, right?
Right. So I think so basically in this case, like there is no, once we make this change, it will work the same. Like if I throw a symbol, I should still end up getting that symbol as the thing that's thrown back, right?
Yeah.
Because
whether by way of wrapper or directly,
right,
doesn't matter. It works.
Okay. So we don't need to make it opt-in or anything. We can just make this change, and because within Node API, the Node add-on API, it will be, you know, storing these things indirectly if necessary, but hiding that, because when you throw it, it will throw the right thing.
Yes. Okay. So basically, yeah, there's still the no JavaScript execution allowed case that Lucas mentioned, and that is valid. However, I think the overall picture here is that we will have reduced the cases in which attempting to throw an exception will result in a fatal error. So because we've reduced it from anytime an API value is not a reference to anytime an API value is not a reference. I'm sorry, an API value is a primitive, to an API value is a primitive and JavaScript execution is not allowed. So that massively reduces the cases in which we throw a fatal error in response.
And because JavaScript, yeah, right. Like if JavaScript execution is not allowed, we can't create the object in the first place.
That's right. Well, no, we can create the object. We just can't assign a property to it. So then basically we would behave as we did as we do now. Because, you know, attempting to throw an error results in a fatal error.
Yeah.
So that's good. We have reduced
Right.
we have reduced
Okay.
the cases in which we fatal out.
Right. So
Yeah.
so in the where is the throw nappy? Node.
So no, you'd want to look at the implementation where we like the callback wrapper is what you'd want to look at, because that's where we have this situation that, you know, if you know, where we do a try and catch. So just look for try, I think.
Okay. Yep. So
Yes,
here. So
yeah.
basically here it needs to do some unwrapping, right?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
I mean, throw as JavaScript exception can do the unwrapping. So
Okay.
the code will be internal to the error class, all of it, which is great.
Right. Okay. So basically, right. So I just want to capture that throw, because I think that would be the last.
Yeah.
I can just put here.
Yep. Yes, that's it.
Right. So we basically need something. Is this wrapped? Yes. We'll do the unwrapping.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that ends up being a fairly small change then, and it doesn't need to be opt-in, because the change in symbol, I guess, is there is some case where, like on the C side of the code, you can get the reference from the error object, and that will change, right, between the two cases. Now, that's a pretty small case, I think, is it?
Yeah, there's, I mean, but we do store we do store a Boolean flag that says this is a wrapped error, right? And so you know, if that flag is false, that means creating the reference succeeded, and we proceed as we do today, right?
Right. I'm just like visible changes. Like, could somebody write code that as symbol, you know, as you write your code, you test it on a version that doesn't support symbol as references. Yep. Now you run it on a version, it runs on a later version. It's actually going to behave differently internally. But is there any external way you see that? And I think in the C code, possibly, because like, can you ask for the reference in an error?
That's a good point. Yes, because an error is a subclass of object reference, so you can ask for the value. Yes.
So maybe we would need to override that method to do the unwrapping as well.
Yes, we could. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That would make sense. You know, also in override value so that it does unwrap as well, right?
Yeah.
And that basically, I think if we do that, then there's no visible people, like outside of, there's no visible change outside of the internal. Like the only change is internals. Anything, anybody saying, give me the symbol, will still get the actual symbol, both C code and it. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Good catch.
Okay. Okay. So I think that's pretty clear now.
Yep.
I want to mention that there is another method we may not be able to override, is that it's the reference operator to NAPI ref.
Where and which one would that be?
It's defined in reference class, and it has an operator to convert reference class to NAPI ref.
Right. Okay.
Reference.
So
operator,
in here?
Yeah. Operator converting to NAPI ref.
Which line is that? Is that?
It's reference class. You are viewing the object reference.
Is there some way I can, if I do this, is that going to help get there faster? Nope.
Maybe a space before the search so that it can search.
It
no.
didn't. Okay, well, let's just keep going.
Oh, it's reference.
Maybe reference colon reference.
No, there is a generic template T before the column.
So if I say template, like that?
It's
No.
I'm not sure what the symbol is coding. Maybe search operator space, not pref.
Okay.
Underscore ref. Yeah, right. That's it.
Okay, so
we
this
have
one.
to decide what these functions behave when we are referencing the
Right.
wrapping the primitive values. People can get the wrong reference for the error.
Right, but they would still get the same reference. I guess it's that when that reference calls value, we want that to return. We want it to do the unwrapping there.
Yeah, this is where the leak will happen. Yeah, there's no way to handle this because we cannot return an NAPI ref like a C ref object for. I mean, we can, but then it'll be to the object, not to the primitive.
Right, but couldn't we, like, instead of this, we want to use subclass of reference where we override value.
Yes, but in the case of the casting operator, right? People actually want the C reference, and we cannot give them a C reference to a primitive. We just can't, right? Because we didn't actually create a C reference to a primitive. We created a C reference.
Right. Yeah. Right,
so
but they'll get the C reference. So
they'll have to get the value themselves from the object. We cannot give it to them because they want a reference, an NAPI ref. You know,
right, but I'm thinking we give them a ref, but it's a ref to the object. That's a ref to the object we created, right?
Yes, but their intention when requesting a C ref is to pass it directly to the C API. So then we don't have the opportunity to unwrap for them anymore, because now it's an API reference.
Right. Okay. Yes. Okay. I get that. Yeah. Okay. Right.
So this would have to be documented. It's one of the shortcomings or one of the limitations of this wrapping. So this would have to be documented, that the casting operator will give you the object, not the primitive.
Right. So document that if you get
if you cast the error to a reference, to a C reference, then you get the wrapper. Versus the primitive.
Yeah. So I was thinking that right. Is the like
yeah, possibly symbol, yes.
And that's the case where, like, for primitives, I have no concern because today you just get an error and you would, so it's not, there's no difference in behavior. So the only question is if this case where, like, okay, now it will work for symbols, but you may get the symbol or you may get the
yes.
Now the only case, right. So maybe though, if we just document that.
Yeah, it is, and we should also document the key under which we stored the value, because if you can write code that says, if if the ref, you get the value from
Right.
the ref. If it is an object and you know you didn't create an object, then you know it's a wrapper. So it's kind of duck typing a little bit, but it's the best we can do.
Right. And I guess the question is this something we should like try and make opt-in so that, but I think this is a edge enough case that it's very unlikely somebody's going to run across this, like where they now written some code, like it won't have worked until we do this.
Yeah.
They would have to write some additional code that will now work, and it'll work one way in an older version.
Yep.
And
Nobody
then
has
it,
written. Nobody has
Right.
written code that successfully constructs an error object from a primitive. Nobody has done that
Right.
because it fails.
Right.
So everybody's like, oh, so this causes a fatal exception. Okay, well then I better do something else, right?
Right.
So nobody has written code like this. So
Right.
so you know the consequences of code that nobody has written are well undefined.
Right.
So
And if they write it in, think like the two different the cases that could happen is they could write it on a newer version and say, oh, I get the object I expected back, and then run it on an older version, and they wouldn't get the object they expected.
And that's why we need to document this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's an edge enough case that just documenting is enough risk mitigation. So yeah, okay.
You know, to be fair, just throw an error object, a JavaScript error object, you know, and then you'll be set. It's good practice anyway. It's not good practice to throw the number 5. That's just like, come on, you know, new error 5, sure.
Right.
You know, so we're already kind of holding people's hands and giving them crutches at this point, you know,
Right.
instead of having them do proper JavaScript, and we're going way out of our way to help them out here.
Right. Okay, I think this is good. Jack, Jack, I know you were going to maybe take a look. Does this seem pretty clear now, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it.
Okay, and let us know if you have any questions or whatever.
Yeah,
and I'll just capture that there. So we are 5 minutes after already. I did want to, let's see, just if we quickly, there was one, I think this one we already talked about, possibly.
Yeah, we've approved, but
I think that one, yeah, so I think that one's okay. And actually that one, I'm just going to take off the edit. I think we've done what we needed to on that one. And this one was another one I just wanted to take a quick, you know, see, does anybody have any concerns on this, adding this iterator?
Yeah, I'd have to have a look. Which one is this? 930. Yeah, let me open that.
Yeah. I took a look at it and I couldn't come up with anything that I thought would be an issue. But I thought it would be good to get a little feedback. While Gabriel takes a look, does anybody have any other issues that they want us to definitely cover today?
Okay.
And I guess Jack and I guess we lost Deepak, but like, did you have anything on the test front you wanted us to cover to get you unblocked or anything like that?
Not I can think of, but I think I had a PR up for like the testing functional references. That was up for a bit, and one of you guys can take a look at it again.
So that's, let me just find that one, testing.
Yep, this is 1035. Yeah.
1035. Okay.
Oh, there's probably some conflicts I have to resolve, but yeah.
Yeah, and there's one comment from Kevin. So yeah, so like if you address those comments, then we can probably get it landed.
Okay.
Sweet.
So I guess Gabriel, you know, if you just, I know you're looking at that one now. If you just want to comment there, if like if you don't have any concerns, comment one way or the other, and then you know I can take a look at landing it if there aren't any concerns.
All right. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thanks for everybody's time then, and good discussion. And we'll talk to everybody later.
All right, bye.
Talk to you
Yep,
later.
bye.
Bye.